Choosing for all sounds like a pinnacle, a summit of clarity, and it is. But summits are exposed places. The air is thin, the winds are strong, and the warmth of the crowded valley is a distant memory. This episode is a clear-eyed look at the weather at the top. It embraces a non-negotiable reality. There is no path, no choice, no commitment that unfolds without consequence. To choose is to invoke a result. To act is to invite a reaction. This is the final sobering integration of the law of cause and effect into the fabric of conscious life. Even the most well-intentioned, spiritually aligned choices carry a cost. Choosing integrity in a corrupt system may cost promotions or social standing. Choosing deep presence in a distracted world may cost the superficial camaraderie of shared gossip. Choosing to set a healthy boundary may cost the temporary comfort of a dysfunctional relationship. Choosing to speak an unpopular truth may invite the friction of ridicule or rejection. The wizard, having made the choice for all, does not then expect a life of ease and universal approval. The magic here is not in avoid suffering, but in choosing which suffering to endure. This is the critical discernment. There is the suffering of responsibility, the fatigue of effort, the ache of care, the loneliness of the path, the weight of seeing what others might ignore. This is the suffering that comes from engaging fully with life, from choosing growth, from standing in one's truth, and there is the suffering of avoidance, the gnawing pain of complicity, the hollow ache of regret, the slow, soul-crushing decay that comes from betraying one's own knowing for the sake of comfort, and the profound anguish of a life lived asleep. The wizard understands these as two distinct currencies of pain and chooses consciously to pay in the former. The suffering of responsibility is finite, meaningful, and leads to expansion. The suffering of avoidance is infinite, corrosive, and leads to contraction. This is the essence of conscious consent. It is willingly saying yes to the known cost of awareness. It is walking into the fire of consequence with eyes open, because the alternative is to sleepwalk into a freezer, slowly losing feeling until there is nothing left to feel at all. We suffer the consequence of being awake, the consequence of feeling more, seeing more, caring more, and therefore being vulnerable to more pain, because the consequence of being asleep is far greater, more existential pain, the pain of never having truly lived. This philosophy of choosing one's suffering is the bedrock of heroic mythology and ascetic discipline. It is the via dolorosa, the way of suffering, not as punishment, but as a chosen path of purification. In the Christian narrative, this is embodied in the Gethsemane moment. Facing his imminent crucifixion, Jesus prays, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." This is an archetypical moment of conscious consent. He acknowledges the horror of the suffering before him, the cup, feels the human desire to avoid it, and yet consciously submits his will to a larger purpose. He chooses the suffering of the cross over the suffering of abandoning his mission and the people he loved. His resurrection is mythologically dependent on his full acceptance of the consequence. The Buddhist path, founded on this understanding, the first noble truth is the truth of dukkha, often translated as suffering, but more accurately as unsatisfactoriness, the inherent friction of conditioned existence. The path does not promise to remove all dukkha from life. It offers a way to end the extra self-created suffering that comes from craving and aversion. By following the noble Eightfold Path, one chooses the suffering of discipline, mindfulness, and ethical restraint, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, to end the far greater suffering of endless, uncontrolled reactivity and rebirth. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on this principle. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control our judgments and choices about them. Suffering for a Stoic arises not from the event itself, but from our refusal to accept the event as part of the natural, rational order of the cosmos. The practice is to consciously consent to reality as it is, to amor fati, love of one's fate, even when it involves pain. This consent transforms passive victimhood into active, dignified endurance. This is not masochism at its ultimate integrity. It is the alignment of action with knowing and the acceptance of the full price of that alignment. The wizard who chooses the path of harmlessness will sometimes suffer the mockery of those who see kindness as weakness. The one who chooses to see unity may suffer the loneliness of being out of sync with a culture of division. This is the cost of consciousness. It is the energy required to maintain a higher order, more complex state of being in a system that often rewards simplification and unconsciousness. The magic of conscious consent is that it disarms victimhood. When we willingly accept the consequence of our choices, we are no longer passive recipients of fate. We are active participants in a co-created drama. The pain becomes meaningful. It becomes the heat that forges character, the pressure that creates diamonds, the friction that allows the spiral to turn. This understanding allows for a profound compassion for oneself and others. We see the person lashing out not as a villain, but as someone choosing unconsciously. The suffering of anger and alienation over the perceived, more terrifying suffering of vulnerability. We see our own moments of weakness as a temporary choice of the smaller pain over the larger one. In the end, this episode is about the commitment to see it through. The path of the spiral is not a weekend retreat. It is a lifetime engagement. There will be the seasons of bright, effortless flow. There will be seasons of grinding uphill effort. The commitment is to keep walking, to keep choosing, and to keep consenting to the weather, knowing that the consequence of stopping, of spiritual stagnation, is the only true failure. The wizard embraces the blisters, the thirst, and the storm, because they are the undeniable proof that they are on the journey, moving, feeling, and fully alive. The greatest suffering is not the pain of the path, it is a silent, airless void of the path not taken.